Okay, Warren, we're live in the auditorium.
Good afternoon, everyone who is here already. Once again, as you will have learned the last day or two, we'll just wait a few more minutes for everybody to trickle in before starting our next session, which is only one speaker this afternoon, but a very pertinent one at that. We kept him for last because we knew he'd be interesting. And then obviously more time for networking or what have you, but we'll just wait a few minutes before I intro Henny and we kick off. Afternoon again to those who have joined. We are giving others another minute or so just to join in before we introduce our next and final speaker of the day, Henny from Control Union. So bear with us as we allow that to happen. We'll be with you shortly. Okay, Henny, if you are ready, I think let's kick off this final session of the day. If you can take your camera live, and whilst I intro you, you can upload your presentation. That would be great. Give me 2 seconds. There we go.
Okay.
Henny Lowe is from Control Union, as I've mentioned before. He worked as an organic auditor and certifier in the industry for over 6 years. Henny, you don't look old enough to have worked in the industry for 6 years, so obviously organics are doing you proud. Conducting audits against EU, NOP, JAS, so also both Swiss and Natureland standards, as well as Korean organic standards, and a certifier against the EU and NOP organic standards. Most of you in the audience will be aware of Control Union, and if you're not, you ought to be. One of the things that has come up for me in recent times is the good work that Control Union and Henny and the team have been doing with so also in terms of our local environment, but I won't pretend to know enough about that to start talking. So Henny, if you're up and ready with your presentation, over to you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Warren. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, looks good my side.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. So yes, I would like to just briefly this afternoon discuss organic certification and just some background on what is needed for the various parties that can be certified. So what's needed in order to be certified. There's a whole lot of different standards to which a company can certify to. And it's really difficult to, within one session, discuss details regarding exactly what is needed to be certified according to that specific standard. So what I'd like to do this afternoon is just broadly discuss organic certification and mention requirements that is, requirements over all the different organic regulations or standards that we've got. So you've already heard about SAOSO. So you can, in South Africa, certify according to the SAOSO standard. There's a European organic regulation if you would like to export to Europe. The USDA organic regulation if you would like to export to America, JAS for Japan. And then as a certification body, we also offer a certification for inputs. So for fertilizers, pesticides, as Jenny has spoken to us about during the previous session. There's a Korean organic regulation, and then Natirand and BioSwiss are private organic regulations. Natirand is for Germany and BioSwiss is for Switzerland. So if you would like to export to Germany, the primary goal or the primary requirement is EU organic certification, and then some importers will require Natirand for Germany and some will require BioSwiss for Switzerland. And then you have the Chinese organic regulation. So there's a whole lot of different regulations that you can subscribe to. And I would really like to just summarize this afternoon some of the requirements. So just some background to the organic market. The organic certification market is definitely growing worldwide. If we look at the FIBL report that was published in 2020, we'll see that 2 million hectares more land was certified in 2018 versus 2017, and a total of 71 million hectares of land is certified worldwide. And of that 71 million hectares, 50% is within the Oceania area, 22% in Europe, and then 3% of that is in Africa. So, and that 3% then represent 2 million hectares as well. If we look at the monetary value of the organic market, according to FIBL, or according to the FIBL report published, it's worth about 96.7 billion euros in 2018, and that's versus the 15.1 billion euros in 2000. So there's generally been quite a big growth within the past 18 years. The per capita consumption is highest in Switzerland, which is then followed by Denmark and Sweden, but the overall biggest organic market is within the USA, and then followed by the EU and then China. So those are the biggest, or where the biggest organic markets overall is. And then there's about 103 countries worldwide that each has its own organic regulation. So there's really a lot of regulations to work with at the end. Okay, so what is certification? Certification is really from certification body's point of view, a third-party verification. So as a certification body, our auditor will come and visit your field, your processing facility, your export facility, to make sure that that company complies to the organic regulation that you would like to comply to. So the most popular organic regulations are the EU, NOP, and JAS regulations. So for exports to Europe, America, and Japan. And then also private regulations are then SAOSO, Natirand, and BioSwiss. And then less popular ones are Chinese and the South Korean organic regulation. So for China, I only know of one company in South Africa that's certified according to the Chinese organic regulation, and there's about 7 companies in the country that's certified according to the Korean organic regulation. So certification is really about a third-party verification where a certification body verifies whether you comply to that specific standard. Then SAOSO, just briefly, it's really a great standard that was written for companies that would like to supply third-party verified products within the country. So, so also certification would really allow you to supply at a cheaper rate certified product to the retailers or to your market. So also is equivalent to the EU NOP and JAS standards. So if a company is already EU NOP or JAS certified, then you automatically qualify for SAOSO certification. There's only one difference with SAOSO, and that is that there's a social aspect as well. So during the audit, we as control union will need to make sure that your farm workers are receiving minimum wage. If they live on the farm, that the housing conditions are okay, that they the work hours that they're working is within the what the government requires. Just important, there's no equivalency from SAOSO to the EU side. So if you are SAOSO certified, it will not permit you to export to Europe. And that's just the SAOSO website. So if you require more information about SAOSO, they have a great website that provides some useful information. All right, Joe, so the basics, where do you start? So you start with contacting control union. We will then send out an application form. So you fill out the application form, and the purpose of the application form is really to see what you would like to certify, where are you located, how many hectares would you like to certify, what products would you like to certify, and whether those products are certifiable. So if you would, for example, like to certify freshwater fish and you apply for NOP certification, we can tell you that unfortunately aquaculture is not certifiable under the NOP regulations. So the purpose of the application form is really to see what you would like to certify, where are you located, is that product certifiable, and then based on the information provided in the application form, we issue a quotation. So if you would like to certify 1,000 hectares of land, that's going to be, for example, more expensive than certifying 10 hectares of land. So the moment that the client receives a quotation, and if they accept the quotation, they sign it, and that's typically the contract with the certification body. Thereafter, the certification body or control union will send out an organic system plan. It's in short an OSP. The OSP is then a document that it's a template that we send out with a whole lot of different questions in. You answer the questions and you send it back to the certification body. And the OSP really helps the client to prepare for the audit. Basic or 99% of the questions that the auditor will ask during the audit are questions that's asked in the OSP as well. So the OSP is a great tool to prepare for audits. We also ask clients to prepare or to send in product spec sheets, that's basically your recipe. So it's a template that we send out. So if you blend honeybush and rooibos, we ask for the recipe so we can make sure that the recipe complies to the specific standard. And you also send in labels. So we need to verify that the labels that you would like to use is compliant to the specific regulation before the labels are printed. Okay, thereafter, an on-site audit is planned. So an auditor will make contact, conduct the on-site audit. The auditor will write the report. If any non-compliances are identified during the audit, the auditor discusses that with the client, and the client then has between 30 and 60 days to send in corrective actions. And as soon as all the corrective actions are received, the report is reviewed by a certifier, and the certifier then makes the final decision and the certificate is issued. So during audits, certification bodies really follow a risk-based approach. So it's impossible for us to come and audit each and every transaction or each and every processing run that you've done. We identify certain risks and we focus on that. And from that, we draw a general conclusion. So in January 2022, a new EU organic regulation will be published, for example, and the entire regulation has been written surrounding or within a bubble, basically, of following a risk-based approach, and that's at the end the purpose of an audit, and where previously during inspections we tended to try and look at everything. Well, during an audit, we will look at the risks and we will focus on the risks. So the audit is really a snapshot of your year. So the audit is there once a year for a day or 2 days, or however long the audit is, to assess whether your company complies to the specific regulatory requirements or not. And during an audit, an auditor can take a sample. So they can, for example, sample the plant material that you're certifying, take a sample of soil, take a sample of the process product, and send that into a lab, an accredited lab. In South Africa, we mostly use Shaw and Keynes to make sure that no pesticides are detected. It's not mandatory for samples to be taken during an audit. Every year, at the beginning of the year, a client or a certification body completes a risk assessment, and it's an EU and NOP requirement that at least 5% of the total client number of clients of a certification body samples needs to be taken at. So at least 5% of our clients, we need to take samples. And then also unannounced audits. So the NOP regulation, for example, allows a certification body to announce an unannounced audit at least 4 hours before the audit. So an unannounced audit is really where the auditor just pitches up and informs the client, here we are, we need to conduct an audit. An unannounced audit is not a full audit. You only focus on certain parts of the operation. So you will only focus on say the processing part, or whether the product is stored correctly, whether the cleaning register is completed, etc. So it's not a full audit. You only focus on a certain part, but we need to do it at least 10% of our total number of clients. The logistics surrounding an unannounced audit is quite difficult to follow exactly. So most of the time, certification bodies will contact the client saying that we need to conduct an unannounced audit at your operation. Are you available, say, in week 40 of the year? And then in any one of those 5 working days, an auditor will pitch. Because it's impossible to fly to Joburg or to Kimberley or to wherever, and then the responsible person is on leave or the farmer is not there. You drive 300 kilometers and the farm gate is closed and you need to turn around. So from a logistic point of view, certification bodies generally contact the client and to make sure that within that week or within that time frame, the responsible person will be available. Okay, so we've got different audience members. We've got farmers, processors, exporters, and retailers. So I would just like to briefly touch on exactly what the requirements are for farmers, for processors, exporters, and retailers regarding organic certification. So let's start with farmers. A farmer generally has, or there will generally be 2 scenarios at the farmland. It will be a case where there's a new application, so a farmer that's joining the organic certification for the first time, and he wouldn't have applied any prohibited substances for at least 36 months. So it's either fallow land or it's cultivated land that only received compliant inputs, or the second scenario will be that prohibited substances would have been applied. So this can be an example for a new client joining the organic system for the first time, or for an existing client that would like to add new fields. So if you currently have 100 hectares certified and you would like to certify an additional, say, 10 hectares, then these 2 scenarios might apply to you as well. So let's say it's a new field and you've used a prohibited substance, so then that field will generally need to go through a 36-month conversion period. And that's 36 months will start on the day that you signed the contract with the certification body. That's for perennial plants. So 3 years needs to pass before whatever you plant in that field can be harvested as organic. Or if you've got already, say, 10 hectares of pecan trees, that will go through a 3-year conversion period, and whatever you harvest after the 3 years will be considered organic. For perennials, 24 months generally needs to pass. After 24 months, whatever you sow, that harvest will be considered organic. So if it's now September, so if you go through a 24-month conversion period for annuals, whatever you plant or whatever you sow after September 2022, that harvest will be considered organic. The second scenario will be if it's a new field, it's fallow, or it's a field that only received allowed substances or inputs, then you can apply for retroactive recognition of the conversion period. So you can basically skip this 36 months or the 24-month conversion period. And every certification body has its own procedures on how they give permission for a client to skip the conversion period. At Control Union, the client will typically send an email to us saying that I've got fields number 1, 2, and 3. Field 1 is 10 hectares, field 2 is 20 hectares, field 3 is 25 hectares, and I would like to skip the conversion period. And I haven't applied any prohibited substances to this field for the past, say, 36 months. If it's already cultivated field, then the client can send in records, field history records of what inputs have been applied, so that the certification body can assess whether the input is compliant according to the specific regulation or not. And then also very important, you need, when applying for retroactive recognition of the conversion period, you need to send in a letter from a third party attesting that no prohibited substances were applied on your land. In the ideal world, this will be from the Department of Agriculture, but we also allow, for example, if there's a GIF rep that knows your land, for him or for her to give such a letter, as long as it's on an official letterhead to which the third party then signs. Then Control Union will also take a sample during the audit. So if you, it will typically be a soil sample to see if any substances are detected within the field that you will add. And if everything is then okay, then the conversion period can be skipped and you don't need to go through the 36-month or 24-month conversion period. Okay, so now, as soon as your field has received organic status, you can start planting. So the planting material, in the ideal world, the planting material that you use, the seed or the seedlings, must be certified organic. That's the first prize. In South Africa, we don't have planting material, seeds or seedlings organically or organic certified commercially available. So 99% of the time, our clients will ask for permission to use, say, untreated, conventional untreated seeds to plant. So currently, a certification body can provide permission for a client to use untreated conventional seeds. The client then just needs to supply a letter from the actual supplier of the seed saying that the seed is untreated and non-GMO, as well as 2 to 3 letters from other seed suppliers stating that they don't have that seed variety in organic quality. So even though it's common knowledge in South Africa that the chances of finding an organic certified seed that's commercially available is very slim, the regulation still requires that we need to get letters from potential seed suppliers stating that they don't have seed available organically. Okay, so after you've planted, you can use inputs, so fertilizers or pest control products. It's really easy if the products are already certified or attested by a certification body. But if not, then please work closely with your certification body, and we will assess whether that input is then compliant in terms of the specific regulation. There are differences between the different regulations, where some inputs might, for example, be compliant according to the EU regulation, but it's not compliant according to the NOP regulation or to the JAS regulation. So it's really important to work closely with Control Union or with your certification body in assessing whether that input is really compliant or not. Then the farmer needs to keep daily field records. So whenever you plant, so you've purchased 10 kilograms of seed, today I sow 10 kilograms of seed, or I sow 5 kilograms of seed and I still have 5 kilograms in stock, and during the audit you can show the auditor there's the 5 kilograms that I still got in stock. Then also other daily field records is whenever tillage or whenever irrigation takes place, when you harvest, when you remove weeds, etc. All that needs to be recorded on your daily field activity records. And then it's also important to monitor neighboring activity. If your neighbor has a conventional farm that borders your organic field, you need to monitor the potential risk of drift from your neighboring field to your organic farm. Or if you have an organic field, say you farm organic rooibos, and next to your organic rooibos you plant conventional citrus, then you need to manage drift on your own farm, or the risk of drift on your own farm. So in order to manage the risk of drift, farmers typically have buffer areas in place. So there's a buffer between the organic land and your conventional neighboring land or your own conventional field. And none of the regulations stipulates that a buffer must be 50 meters or 10 meters or 100 meters. It really is all about managing the risk of drift. So what some people will do is they will plant trees or they will plant grass. Some farmers will put on a shade net between the conventional and the organic field. Whatever the measure, or as long as there's some form of measure in place to manage the risk of drift. And then also you need to indicate that the measure that is in place is effective. So if you've planted grass, that grass is effective in preventing drift. So what most farmers will do is they will sample. They will take samples once a year, once every 2 years, or once every 3 years of that specific field to see whether any substances are detected on the vegetation. The farmers also needs to have maps. So it can, for example, be Google Maps. It can be any form of map, as long as the map shows where you are. It shows a direction. It shows the fields. It shows where the buffers are. It shows general landmarks, for example, dams, or where the storage facilities are, or where the roads are. So as long as you have a map with those information on, and as long as the auditor can follow this general sense of direction during the audit while visiting the fields. Okay, so records is really important, especially records of inputs that you keep, and we also need to be able to balance the inputs that you use. So if you use a certified, say, chicken manure, then if you've purchased 50 kilograms and you've used 50 kilograms, then your records must show that. You must have an invoice stating that you've purchased 50 kilograms, and you must have your farm records must show that you have used the 50 kilograms. If you've only used half of it, then 25 kilograms must be somewhere in storage. Okay, other records that's important. All farmers needs to provide the certification body an estimated yield of the fields. So the estimated yield must be, you must say, I guess, or I estimate that within the next harvesting season, I will harvest 500 kilogram of organic rooibos per hectare from my fields. As long as the estimated yield is realistic. If you have 2 hectares of rooibos, you cannot produce 100 tons of tea. So as long as it's a realistic figure, it will not be exact. You know, seasons change. You will have more than average rainfall, then your yield will go up, or you will have below average rainfall, then your yield will go down. Some fields will be on the southern slope of a mountain, so it's more moist, so your yield will be higher compared to the other yields or the other fields that's on the northern slope of the mountain where it's drier. So it depends, as long as there's some form of rationale or explanation that you can give why the yields are higher or lower than what you've estimated, then it's fine. And you also need to keep harvest records. So this is just an example. So say on field 10, I've harvested rooibos on the 5th of Jan and I got a ton. Or on field 6, I've harvested table grapes on the 10th of January and I got 10 tons. So that you know, you can show exactly, I've harvested a ton of rooibos, I've sold a ton of rooibos. I've harvested a ton of rooibos, I've processed it further, I've fermented it, it gave me half a ton. I've pasteurized it, the half a ton gave me 400 kilograms, and I've sold 400 kilograms of pasteurized rooibos. Or I've harvested 10 tons of table grapes, and I've sold 10 tons of table grapes. Or I sold slightly less because there was loss of moisture, or whatever the case must be, or whatever the case is. But you need to keep harvesting records, and that will then link with your sales records at the end. So you cannot harvest, or you cannot sell 20 tons of a product if you've only harvested 10 tons of that product. Then other records, cleaning records needs to be kept if the equipment that you use poses a risk. So if you have harvesting equipment, a tractor or sickles or whatever, scissors that you use in conventional fields as well as in your organic fields, then it needs to be cleaned when it goes from your conventional field to your organic field. And you need to keep a record of that cleaning that you've done. Within the or overall the organic regulations, in general, all cleaning chemicals is fine. People tend to use food grade cleaning chemicals as long as the potential risk of contamination is managed. So what most people will do as a last step, they will thoroughly rinse the product off, or not the product, the equipment off with water to ensure that there is no risk of potential contamination. So as long as you have a procedure describing how you're going to clean your product, then you have a record describing that I've cleaned my product as per my procedure, then it will be fine. Okay, so in short, that's what the requirements are for farmers. I would just briefly like to touch on wild collection because there is quite a number of wild collecting operations within the industry. So wild collection is really the collection of wild products. So, for example, rosehip, devil's claw, baobab, marula, sausage tree fruits, or whatever. It's really the collection of wild plants. So it's plants that isn't irrigated, it's not fertilized, you don't prune it, you don't do anything to it, it just naturally occurs in the wild. It's also plants that wasn't physically planted. Sometimes, or many times, we get requests from Mozambique where nuts, nut trees or mango trees were planted there 100 years ago. The fact is, it was planted. It doesn't occur there naturally, so we cannot certify that under wild collection. It needs to be certified under crop production. So the plants needs to occur naturally within the area. So in order to certify, you need to prove compliance of at least 36 months. So there wasn't any form of oil spill or whatever that occurred within that area. So in generally, to prove that, clients get a letter from a third party attesting that no prohibited substances were applied to the wild collection area for at least 36 months. Then you will have collectors collecting for your company. Those collectors need to be trained. So they need to know how to harvest that product sustainably so that you don't overexploit the product. The collectors can only collect for your company or for the company that is certified. The moment that a collector collects for various companies, they will be classified as a trader. So they will then choose to who they supply, and they will start trading the product. And the regulations then require that collector to be certified independently. So it's very important for the certified entity to be in control of that. So they will typically have contracts with the collectors, and the collectors will only then supply to that company. Maps also needs to be in place for the area that's being wild collected, so that the certification body can see where the wild collection takes place. If you look at the wild collection area in relation to the closest conventional farmland, how far is it, etc., so that we also know which area to visit during the audit. Then purchase registers needs to be kept so that at the end, that specific bag of product can be traced back to a specific collector. That collector is on your collector's list. It's he or she has a contract with your company, etc. So that, and we know exactly in which area then also the collection took place. So purchase registers needs to be in place, showing that that bag came from that collector. There's the contract. Or the contractual agreement with that person. And then overall, the operator just needs to be in control of the collectors. So the operator or the certified entity needs to make sure that the collectors collect sustainably, that they collect within the assigned collection area. Because the moment if you have assigned a certain collection area, where you're going to conduct the wild collection if the moment that they move outside that collection area, it's in an uncertified or in an uncontrolled area, and that product will then be declassified as organic, because we do not know exactly what happened on those fields or on that specific land. All right, so moving on to processing facilities or to factories. It's really important to have good procedures in place. So at your factory door, you will receive a raw product. Then you need to verify, is this product that I'm receiving now, is it organic or is it not organic? So if it's organic, where's the organic certificate? Does the delivery note and the invoice, does it make reference to the organic status of that product? Yes, it does. So the product is entering my facility. So you need to make sure that it's on a valid organic certificate. So some organic certificates expire. An EU organic certificate expires. An NOP organic certificate never expires. It's valid forever. Every year, an updated certificate is issued by the certification body. But the only time that the certificate is not valid anymore is when the certification body suspends the client because of a major violation against the regulation, or when the client willingly say, I don't want to be NOP or NOP certified anymore, so they cancel their certification. That's the only time when an NOP certificate is not valid anymore. So it's important to make sure that there's a valid organic certificate for the product that you receive. There is an invoice and there's a delivery note, and everything makes reference to the organic status of that product, as well as the label that's physically on the product. So you have a written procedure on how you're going to receive the goods. So in my procedure, I will describe, for example, I will verify that there's a valid organic certificate. I will look at the invoice and I will look at the delivery note, and then the product may enter my facility. So the moment that it enters your facility, you need to store it. The product is typically stored. The regulation, or all the regulations, typically mentions storage or separation in time and in space. So that means that in time or in space, the product must be stored separately from a conventional product. So in space means I've got a separate storage facility just for my organic products. There it is. Nothing else in that storeroom enters if it's not organically certified. In time means I've got one storage facility. I store organic and conventional products in the storage facility. So in the left-hand corner, I store organic products, and in the rest of the facility, I store my conventional products. The section where the organic product is stored is clearly labeled. There's a sticker or a marker that indicates organic. Or what some other people or what other clients will do is they will, for example, paint, say, a green or a yellow or red stripes on the floor, marking wherever the organic products will be stored. As long as it's clearly identifiable or clearly marked where it's going to be stored. So storage can take place in time, same facility, just in a different area, separately from the conventional products, or in space where you have a dedicated organic storage facility. The most important part here is that the risk of contamination is managed. So if you open a bag of rooibos, that conventional rooibos doesn't contaminate the organic rooibos. So if you store, if you've got shelves in your storage facility, then clients will typically store the organic products on top. So that because if a conventional product is on top and any spillage takes place, the organic product will be contaminated. So as long as the risk of contamination is managed. The storage facility also needs to be cleaned. That's if there's a risk of contamination. If you store, say, wine that is in bottles, that is in boxes, that is in on a pallet and it's wrapped, the risk of contamination is basically zero. But if you have a silo where you store organic maize in, and tomorrow you store conventional maize in, and the day after that organic maize is again in the silo, you need to clean the silo in order to prevent any form of contamination. So if there's a risk, the storage facility needs to be cleaned. Again, you need to have a procedure describing exactly how you're going to clean it, and then a record saying, I followed my procedure, I've cleaned it as my procedure says I'm going to clean. Then you start processing. The processing line, if you don't have a separate processing line for organic and for conventional, but if you use one line for organic and conventional, that line needs to be cleaned. So again, a cleaning procedure, again, cleaning records need to be in place. And then how do you clean? Some people will use food grade cleaning chemicals and then thoroughly rinse with water afterwards. If your line doesn't tolerate water, so especially within the tea industry, you can't mix moisture and the tea, clients will use a purge. So they will flush the system with a certain amount of organic rooibos. They will push through the system. Whatever comes out, they downgrade to conventional, and then they start the organic processing, and they start packing and processing organic products. You need to keep very good control of your stock so that we know whatever goes in comes out. So if a ton of product enters the processing line, that a ton comes out, or if a ton enters and a half a ton comes out, where did the other half a ton go? Was there loss of moisture? Was it wastage? So as long as you can show that you've got control over your stock, so that's the quantity of raw material in and the quantity of raw material out. And then that basically then will form the traceability of the product. So you would have received, during the receival stage, you would have received a certain batch. You would have stored that batch. Maybe you have blended different batches during processing, as long as all those different batches can be traced back to whenever the products was stored and when it was received, so that indeed everything within the bag at the end of the day can be traced back to the organic suppliers. So batch numbers needs to be in place so that it can be traced back to whenever the raw material entered the facility. Okay, you also need to have a recall, suspicious batch, and the customer complaints procedure, and then cleaning chemicals to use. We've already spoken about that. And you need to have an organic certificate of your supplier that is relevant to whatever you are certifying to. So if you would like to be EU organic certified, only it doesn't help that you provide an NOP organic certificate of the supplier. Then you need to provide an EU certificate from your supplier. Except for also where there's equivalency with EU, then the EU certificate will be accepted. You also need to have a product flow map of your processing facility, and as well as a facility layout map. And all the cleaning that's done, you need to be able to monitor the effectiveness of that cleaning. So what most people will do is, for example, they will do swap analysis to make sure or to show that when I purge with 100 kilograms, that's sufficient. Or no, it's not sufficient, and that's why I purge with 200 kilograms of organic product. Then balance and traceability records need to be in place. So this is all about the control of your stock, so that if you've received a ton of product and if you've received a ton of oranges, that you have packed a ton of oranges and you've sold a ton of oranges. That's going to be your balance. So typically during audits, certification bodies look at a year's data when assessing the balance. So they will see over a year's period, you've received so many kilograms of product, and you've sold so many kilograms of product. And in between, they will look at the processing records. So you've received, you've processed, and you've sold, so that you don't receive 10 tons and you've sold 20 tons of oranges. During balance calculations, the variances is also taken into consideration. So if you harvest wet moringa leaves, you dry it, that 1 ton of moringa leaves is, for example, going to give you half a ton of dry leaves. And at the end, you're going to make a powder out of that, and that's going to give you, say, 450 kilograms of powder, or whatever the case might be. So it's really about keeping the balance and showing that you've got control over that stock movement. Traceability will be, you've had a sale, we look at the invoice, we trace that invoice or that batch that's mentioned on the invoice, we trace that batch back and see how it links with your processing record and how that links then with the batch that you've received. So all your records must be able to be linked to one another, or we need to be able to link those during a traceability exercise. So it's really, traceability is really about, it's like a river. You can conduct traceability from where the river starts until where it ends, so that's downstream, or you can start from where it ends and you can trace it back to where it starts, so that's upstream. So typically, I, for example, like doing it upstream. So I will look at an invoice, I will see on that invoice, those batch numbers occur, those batch numbers were processed on that day, there's the processing records. Before it was processed, my facility was cleaned, there's the cleaning records. There's the records when the batches were received, and there's the invoice that was supplied with the batches that was received. So that will be your traceability upstream. All right. So in a nutshell, that's it for processing facilities. Then over to exporters and importers. So if your company exports, then you need to be certified in order to do that. So some companies, some farmers they will farm, they will process, and they will export. And that will be one company. Other companies will only process and export, and then you will get companies that will only export. Or you get companies that only process, or you get companies that only farm. It varies, but over the spectrum, but some companies can do all activities. They can farm, process, and export. The NOP regulations say that for an exporter, if you receive a product from a processing facility as is, so I receive a box of wine and I want to export that box of wine, I don't relabel it, I don't repack it, I do nothing with it, I just take it and I export it. Then you don't need to be certified. If the moment that you're going to put it into another box, you repack it, the moment that you put a label on it, the moment that you do anything to the product that you've received, then you need to be certified as an exporter, because that action then needs to be controlled. For the EU, all exporters need to be certified. And for JAS, again, exporters doesn't have to be certified. So for EU, in order to export to Europe, you need to register on a platform that was created by the European Union called Traces. And for every consignment that you export, or for every container that you export, you need to apply for a certificate from your certification body. So it's called a COI, a certificate of inspection. that certificate then needs to be supplied to your or to the importer, who then needs to take it or supply it to the custom official. Otherwise, the container won't be cleared as organic. So for the EU, you log on to Traces, you apply for a COI, your certification body will be notified. They will make sure all the checks and balances are in place. They will issue the COI, and that document then goes to the importer, goes to the customs official that will then have to clear your container or your consignment. Without the COI, an organic product or consignment will not be cleared in the EU. So if your product arrives in the EU without the COI, it will either have to be downgraded to conventional. It will have to be shipped back to South Africa or to wherever it comes from, and then you need to apply for a COI, and then you have to ship it back. So it's really important to make sure that COIs are applied for. And from the beginning of this year, COIs needs to be applied for before the ship leaves the port in South Africa. So it's really important to make sure that this is in place. So for exports to America, if you're an exporter and you have to be certified, you can export. There is no system like with exports to the EU, there's no traces system for exports to the USA. But sometimes importers request a certificate, an export certificate, and that's called a transaction certificate. So then the certification body just issues a transaction certificate, but that's only if the importer requests it. It's not mandatory, so it's only if the importer requests it. There's equivalency between the USDA or NOP organic regulation and the Canadian organic regulation. So if you're NOP certified, then you can export to Canada. It just needs there are 5 basic things that needs to be checked in order for a product to be equivalent with the Canadian organic regulation. And those questions are all asked and answered in the OSP already. So if you are NOP certified and you would like to export to Canada, you indicate that in the application form and in the OSP, and then you can export to Canada. It's just important for the certification body to mention on your NOP organic certificate that these products are compliant and equivalent to the Canadian organic regulation as well. Okay, so for exporters, balance and traceability is important as well. So we can see you've received a ton of product, you've exported a ton of product, and you also need to have a good receivable procedure. If you as exporter ever receive any product, sometimes an export company or an exporter will only have an office, they never see the product, they never touch the product. The product is physically loaded in the container at the processing facility from where it goes to the harbor, from where it's exported. But if you receive the product, you need to have a good receivable procedure in place, recall procedure, compliance procedure, and suspicious batch procedure. All right. So retailers. Retailers doesn't have to be certified unless they do any form of activity to the product. So if a retailer, for example, receive a carcass, a lamb carcass, and they physically cut it up into chops and into a boat and into a neck, then that process needs to be controlled at the retailer so that it's ensured that whatever carcass is received is organic, and it's indeed the organic carcass that is cut up and packaged for the final consumer to be consumed, and to make sure that that a conventional carcass isn't packed up and or cut up and packed as and sold as organic. So I've never dealt with a retailer in South Africa for certification. So 99.9% of the time retailers doesn't have to be certified. It's only when they physically alter the product. Another thing for retailers is the use of packaging material for organic products. So it's often quite difficult to sell organic products loosely. So you have a basket and it's filled with apples, and you sell the apples loose as organic, because there's it's difficult to control, and you need to be able to label your product as organic. So what sometimes happens is the retailer will add it, or the supplier will add a sticker to the product saying that it's organic with all the requirements on. But in general, it's quite tricky for retailers to sell organic products without it being packed or within packaging material. All right, then just lastly, what cannot be certified? So under each of the, or over all the different regulations, there are products that cannot be certified. So for the EU organic regulation, non-foodstuff products, for example, your wool, textile, cosmetics cannot be certified. So the EU regulation really only makes the room for certification for food products for human consumption, and then feed for animal consumption that can be certified. There's a separate standard, another standard, the GOTS standard for wool and for textiles. And then there's a Cosmos standard for cosmetics to have that certified as organic for exports to the EU market. And then also wildlife cannot be certified. I've received some requests in the past for, wildlife game to be certified in South Africa, but the EU regulation doesn't allow that. Where the NOP organic regulation, for example, does allow it again. So for NOP, aquaculture cannot be certified, so you can't certify any freshwater fish. And cosmetics can be certified, but it needs to comply to the NOP food standard. So for NOP, you don't have a separate cosmetic standard. You only have the food standard, you comply to that, and that's it. So it's often quite difficult for manufacturers to comply to the standard because they want to add ingredients and chemicals that's not listed within the food standard. So it's generally quite difficult to produce a cosmetic product under the NOP regulation. And then for also cosmetics can also not be certified. And then for jazz, for example, wine cannot be certified. Honey cannot be certified. So that is why the application form is so important, so that when we receive the application form, we can assess whether the product that you would like to certify is indeed certifiable. Okay, so in conclusion, there's various organic standards with various requirements. You're most welcome to contact me if you would like to discuss specifics within a specific organic standard. But the fact of the matter is you need to comply to the organic regulation that you would like to sell against. So if you would like to sell an EU organic or export products to Europe, then you need to comply to the EU organic regulation. And generally the entire chain needs to be certified. So the farmer needs to be certified, the factory or the processing facility needs to be certified, and the exporter needs to be certified. It's only with NOP or the USDA organic regulation where in some instances exporters doesn't have to be certified. Then organics is really about keeping records. So you need to be able to show exactly where your products come from. You've got cleaning records, you've got cleaning procedures. If you've received any complaints, that you've recorded those complaints. If anything irregular happened, that you've informed your certification body. So in essence, clients really need to work close with Control Union or close with your certification body in order to make sure that you remain compliant. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. There is our website. So if you would like any other information, you can consult our website. And my email address, you're most welcome to contact me if you've got any or if you need any information. All right, thank you.
Thanks very much for that. I think just one or two questions I had, and not being in this industry per se, more being a silent observer from the outside. As a media person, but a couple of things jumped out as a layman, from a layman's terms. The first thing you mentioned quite early on, which I know a lot of people in the audience will have questioned in their minds, whether they wrote it down or not is a different story. But you spoke about looking to have sight on recipes and that kind of stuff. which obviously immediately suppliers who've put a lot of time and money into innovating and inventing and all the rest of it, protection immediately springs to mind. Now, I'm sure there's contracts and all this kind of stuff, but how are those, those secret recipes and that copywritten side of things, how's that protected from Control Union's perspective?
First of all the employees, everyone signs confidentiality agreements within the contract, and we also sign confidentiality agreements with the clients. So none of information is passed out, and our database where we store information on is also very secure. We need to change passwords on a weekly basis, so it's really kept very secure. But at the end, we need to know what's in the product in order to to certify it. So we need to know if you've used a certain processing aid, is that processing aid listed within the standard and allowed to use, and is the quantities of processing aids allowed to be used within that specific standard. So often in wine, they use wine clients will use sulfur in the wines, but there's certain limits of sulfur that can be used in white wines according to the EU regulation, and certain limits for red wines in the EU regulation. So it is protected, confidentiality agreements, and then on our database, but it is information that fortunately or unfortunately needs to be shared.
Yeah, understood. In terms of your process, obviously you spoke a lot about the ongoing records and various practices that have to now be incorporated into the business as they go forward, and that's a forever thing. In terms of the initial assessment, so I'm a small scale farmer. I engage with Control Union. I say, guys, come have a look, see. Is that a day's worth of walking around taking notes, and then how long until the Control Union come back and say, okay, here's the assessment of your business and your farm, and what you then would need to do to achieve a certification?
The physical on-site audit varies. It just depends on the size of your farm and exactly what you're going to, or what you are farming with. So if you have 2 hectares and you've got wine grapes, that's going to be very quick to assess. But if you've got 2 hectares, but you've got 50 different types of vegetables that you're growing on your 2 hectares, that's going to take longer to assess. So in general, farm audits or production audits doesn't take more than a day. But it depends on the size and what products you are farming with. And then timelines. Every certification body's got different procedures that needs to be followed, or that they are following. We are following, the auditor has a 1-week period to complete his or her report, submit the report to the certifier, and then the certifier has a maximum of 4 weeks to review the report and to issue the final report or the certificate. So there's generally a 5-week period before final conclusions or certificates are issued.
Okay, got you. My final point is I'm sure a burning one in most of the audience's mind, and that's of course of cost. Certification typically has been quite an expensive process. A lot of the small, it's a barrier, to a lot of the small suppliers and producers to cross that line and get into the certification world. How do you assess costs? Obviously, it's based on the individual operations, all the rest of it, and is it still is there no other option outside of the top end scale that I've heard some numbers around, which can be prohibitive? How do you guys tackle that?
The costs are for certification to export to Europe or to America or to Japan are higher than so also. We really try and keep the so also costs as limited as possible. But costs are typically calculated on the amount of time that the auditor needs to prepare for the audit, to conduct the audit, and to write the report, and then the amount of time that the certifier needs to read and to review and to issue the final certificate. So it's all at the end got to do with the time that the staff needs to fulfill those duties. Another cost factor is we, as a certification body, cooperate with our office in Bulgaria, and we need to pay them again for the services that they provide, for example, to our office. And those charges are in euros. So that will obviously also then reflect on the invoice. So at the end, it's the time that the different staff members need to fulfill the duty. And in an average figure, I'm not sure what figures you've heard, but a 3-week audit is going to cost more than a 1-day audit. But in general, if you export to say the States or to the EU as a farmer producing, the cost will be between 20 and 30,000 rand a year.
Okay, that's definitely a lot less than the figures I've heard. So hopefully that's been a work in progress. And I wasn't going to ask you for a figure, but you volunteered it. So thanks very much. Henny, that's perfect from my side, and we appreciate your time. So thanks for coming on board. I'm just going to close the sessions today. Henny, you can drop off if you're ready. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So first of all, from that closes the sessions for today, and ultimately the conference sessions for the 2 days. The expo side is still open into the evening. Wayne, can you just confirm to me how long the expo side will be open?
Warren, we can leave it open for the next couple of days if you'd like. If people have not had a chance, we're not under any pressure to shut it down. So we could perhaps leave it open until Friday. And
that would be wonderful if you guys can do that. That'd be great. So
problem.
everyone, please then do visit the stands. They'll be open for a few more days. Engage, open the discussions. That's what this whole thing is about. We as the organizers of the Organic and Natural Expo, which has now moved to next year, this whole thing is about keeping the conversation going, and that's really what we're trying to do. Our portal, as well as this conference and expo exercise, has not been a money-making adventure for us. Very much not so. All of the revenues that we are generating are going back into initiatives to, as we've said, keep the conversation going. It's been a trying 6 months for everyone in this industry. And if we can all work together and band together to get the business stimulated and get it going, then ultimately that's the goal. So I'd just like to say a very big thank you again to all of our speakers, Matt Perkis, so also Erica Jobert from Westgrow, Lorraine Jenks, Green Stuff, who I see has been listening intently, Kerry Elliott and Andrea Slabber from Trade Intelligence, Janet Gracie and Nofo and the team, Jenny Slabber from Talborn, Gary Jackson from Jackson's Real Food Market, and of course you've just listened to Henny Lowe from Control Union. This is all sponsored time of their own accord, dedicated free of charge to try and help and assist and give their time to the industry. So we really do appreciate it. And then all of our partners, City of Joburg, USAID, Green Stuff, Mega. I'm gonna miss a few. I should never have actually started naming, but all of them, thank you so much. We really do appreciate the efforts, and we are all available to engage going further. We will be distributing the talks. We will be making them available on the portal as well. We'll be distributing answers to all of the questions that have been asked. There were some raised that we haven't had time to answer to all attendees. So again, thanks everyone for your participation, and please go now and engage with those stands. They're waiting to receive you. The nut suppliers go to Westgrow, as we said earlier. And Wayne and Alison and Trisha and the EON team, thanks also again for your help in the back end to stitch it all together. That will be me signing off. We'll chat soon. Cheers.